Welcome to Gold Shields. Join NYPD veterans Tom Smith and Dan Murphy. With over 50 years of combined experience chasing drug lords, dismantling cartels, and hunting terrorists. Now they pull back the curtain, sharing raw, unfiltered stories from the front lines and the heroes who stood beside them. No topics off limits. This is real. This is true crime. This is Gold Shields.
Welcome back to Gold Shields. This is Dan Murphy along with my partner in crime, Tom Smith. How are you, buddy?
I'm doing good, man. The weather's changing. It's getting a little warmer up in the Northeast, so I'm happy.
Pitchers and catchers, a little bit of preseason ball going on, right?
You said it, man. That and March Madness coming up. It's the only thing I'm looking forward to because sports-wise, February is horrible. So after the Super Bowl, you got to just wait. I mean, it's bad when you're waiting for spring training. You have to watch a spring training game. That's bad.
Right, yeah. This is that dead time of year between sports, so to speak, yeah. Not to insult basketball, hockey, or pickleball fans, whatever, but yeah, we're looking to get right back to baseball, that's for sure. So we have an amazing guest today. We're very honored to have him on, but before we do that, every week, Tom, we make a habit of making sure we mention some companies we feel powerfully involved with and strongly about their mission, some organizations. Please tell us who we want to talk about today.
Yeah, as always, what's close to our heart, Cop Line. Way too many cops are hurting themselves out there. Families, are devastated over this problem going on in law enforcement. And Cop Line is a great organization that provides assistance to anyone who's looking to need a conversation or need to talk to someone. Please go to copline.org, 1-800-COP-LINE, 1-800-267-5463. Even if it's a quick conversation, you just need to get something off your chest, don't hold it in. Call Cop Line. That's why they're there. And, we have a great new partner that I just want to mention. We're going to get way more into it. But Wounded Warrior Project, we are now working with and kind of partnered with their great message and what they do for the military vets. And their mission is, you can't talk enough about them, and we are so proud to be lined up with them now. And like I said, we'll get more into it. That's actually brand new, everyone. So everyone might be hearing it for the first time. That just happened over the last couple of days. So we're very proud of that. You'll hear more about that.
Yep, super excited about it. Fantastic organization. If you listen to the show, that Tom and I, we have a heart for law enforcement and military who've served this country and who need to be treated with dignity, respect, and everything that we can do for them, we should do for the rest of our lives. People who risk their lives for us. And Wounded Warriors does just that. Phenomenal organization. So proud and blessed to be part of their world now.
Yep, no doubt. And one last thing before we get to our guest, Coming Home Well. Make sure you check us out if you miss our show at any point during any time. We are on the Coming Home Well streaming radio channel. Just go to their website, cominghomewell.com, or pick up the app on the Apple Store. And you can hear us every Wednesday night, 9 p.m. Central Standard Time. We're really proud to be part of that, too. Streaming radio station with us on it is something we would have never thought of a couple of years ago. So we can't thank them enough for including us in that great world that they're in. Cominghomewell.com. Check them out Wednesday nights, 9 p.m. Central Standard Time. You know what, Dan? Law enforcement is hard. We've said it forever. Law enforcement on the state and local level, federal level. But when you do it at the highest level that organization offers is such an accomplishment. And we're so proud and happy to have our guest on today, Rob D'Amico, who did that in the Marines, in the FBI, anything you think of the highest levels that the FBI has, Rob did it. From HRT to undercover work to working in Afghanistan and all that. And we're going to get into all that today with this great guest and good friend of ours. I had the opportunity to meet him on Surviving a Survivor. We did a couple of shows together and clicked and just said, hey, we need you on the show. So, Rob, welcome to Gold Shields. Thanks for joining us, buddy.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
So, Rob, Tom just listed off some of your resume stuff, and My father was a Marine for 8 years. He's a Korean War veteran. I've had nothing but the utmost respect for Marines. And then you made your way to the FBI. Tell us a little bit about your career path, if you don't mind, and how you came to do some of the stuff that you did.
Well, it's pretty odd, and I didn't like really put it together. I remember I was actually in the FBI, and my mom and dad were moving from New Jersey down to Florida, and she found something I wrote in second grade, and it said, "What do you want to be?" And I had on there Marine and FBI, and I can see Marine because I probably watched Iwo Jima or whatever, but I don't remember watching shows about the FBI when I was young, so I don't know what really put that in my mind. But I was senior year of high school. I wanted to go into Marine. I wanted to enlist in the Marine Corps, and a couple of my friends were, and my parents really wanted me to go to college. So the compromise was enlist in the Marine Corps Reserves and then go to college. And my mom and two sisters went to Ohio State, and they had an infantry reserve unit at Ohio State. So I said, okay, I'll enlist in the reserves. I'll be able to go infantry, which is what I wanted to do, in the reserves, and then I'll go to college and go into Marine Corps. And that's exactly what I did. Enlisted, and thank God I went to Marine Corps boot camp between high school and college, because I was a typical Jersey smart ass, high schooler, didn't finish a full day of high school. And then I went to Marine Corps that literally the day after I graduated high school, like that next morning at 5 a.m., Sergeant Bella was there picking me up. I have a picture of him picking me up, and all the kids that were out like partying for high school graduation just totally toilet papered my yard. They all knew I was going to boot camp, and I left, and I got down to boot camp, and I thought I was going to be really good, and the drill instructors got on me like really fast and hard, and I was like, holy shit, like, and I kept every night like, what did I get myself into? But thank God they did that, because I graduated fairly high. And I went to college, and I like started. I went to every class. I didn't skip a class, I think, until my junior year. I still went out drinking. I just knew what nights to do it and not. But the Marine Corps discipline, I had a 4.0 my first year. I'm like, wow, if you go to class, you do homework. It's not that hard. It's one of those things that I never learned. But it set me up to end up going through. I got commissioned as a second lieutenant, went in the Marine Corps on active duty then. And I thought I was going to do 20 years. And at about the 4-year mark, I had a reserve commission, and you have to apply to stay on active duty. And it was a year that the Marine Corps was cutting down, and I didn't make it. And they only augmented like 2 infantry officers that year. So I went back into the reserves down at 3rd Force Recon, and started doing like all the reconnaissance schools and stuff like that. And the Bureau was frozen. They weren't hiring. And I think about 2 years later, they finally opened up hiring, and I ended up getting in the Bureau. So when I look back on it, I'm like, wow, there's a whole bunch of things that happened that I really just didn't understand at the time, but set me up to really get to where I wanted to go. Because if I'd stayed in the Marine Corps, obviously I wouldn't have gotten in the FBI. So it was one of those kind of things when you look back at it, what you want to be, like everything kind of came out. And it was the same thing when we'll talk about my FBI career, all the things I wanted to do. I feel like I was Forrest Gump, like everything that happened, I fell into. Some of it I had to try out for, but everything I wanted to do in the Bureau kind of happened too. And it's like one of those cases that's kind of odd. Like you can want something, but it just timing doesn't work out. And it actually ended up working out. And it's one of those, I look back on, I'm like, wow, it was like just everything set up. You don't know it at the time. Cause I applied to one other federal agency, didn't get in. I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe it. Cause of the FBI was frozen, but everything kind of happens for that reason, so to speak.
So you glossed over something pretty important to the audience that doesn't understand much about certain elements of our special forces. You mentioned Force Recon. Now, it's tough enough to be a United States Marine. Tell us about Force Recon.
So it's funny. There was a magazine in the like mid 80s out. It was called Gung Ho. And it was like, so if you're old enough, you'll remember. It's about mercenaries and special ops, and it was all these things I read about, and there was a a special Recon Force Recon. It was like fall of '84, my senior year, and I didn't even know much about it. My one buddy, John, who I went in the Marine Corps with, John Cleary, who, was one of those guys, just 35 dead hang pull-ups. He went straight enlisted in the Marine Corps. But he was the guy who knew about Recon. And I got that magazine and started reading about it. And there was a guy, what was his name? He was a enlisted guy, got commissioned an officer in Vietnam, and was with 3rd Force and then MACSOG V, which is, as you know, a bunch of classified programs. And they had this article about him, and he literally had like 5 silver stars, 9 bronze stars, like 7 purple hearts. He didn't even count Purple Heart. He didn't count medals unless you got a Purple Heart with it. And I remember he was the first guy that said, someone asked him like, what do you feel when you kill someone? He's like, recoil. Like it was one of those. But I read that magazine to the point where it fell apart. Like it was one of those things that just kind of fell apart. And it was odd because I wanted it so bad. I enlisted, went infantry. I actually had a flight contract. When I got back from boot camp, I was in New Jersey waiting to go to school in Ohio, like in a week. And the recruiter for the officer program had saw all my ASVAB scores. They're fairly high, knew I was going out to Ohio. And he literally was at my house when I got home from boot camp. And he's like, hey, come down. We'll get you in the officer program. I didn't realize quotas and stuff. So he was making sure he got his quota. So, in recruiting, but he said, hey, you want to be a pilot? I'm like, fuck no. I don't want to be a pilot. I want to be, infantry. That's right. He goes, no. You want to be a pilot? I'm like, no, sir. I really don't. And the third time he said it, I'm like, okay, aye, sir. So I took the test and I actually got a contract to be a pilot in the Marine Corps. And I had it all the way up until I got to the basic school, which is kind of officer boot camp. And I gave it up to go infantry because I'm like, wow, you don't lead people from a cockpit. Even though, there's some great pilots out there. It's not what I want to do. But the Recon, I'd tried out for 2nd Force Recon. They have a selection. And it was, when I was a first lieutenant, and I passed it. I had a shirt that was all bloody from the unbelievable, march you do and run with the rucksack on and everything else. But I was, on the end of my time on active duty, and they wanted to send me over there, and it, devastating. So when I got in the reserves, the 3rd Force Recon was a reserve unit, went down there, and then I did all the schools, and I had a chip on my shoulder at that point because I hadn't been retained on active duty, and I got honor grad at every school I went to, just basically telling the Marine Corps, hey, you screwed up, you should have kept me. I ended up doing a bunch in the reserves after as an officer, I got out as a lieutenant colonel, but I did a bunch of things that way. But the guys in Force Recon are great dudes. They're all self-motivated. They're just studs. I remember I ran one of my fastest 3 miles at the basic reconnaissance course. I ran it in 17:45, and I was 3rd to last of the class of 25, because they're all 20-year-old just studs. And I'm like, holy shit, that was my 2nd fastest time, and I was 2nd to last. But it's one of those things that you're running with the best.
Yeah, but you know what? It just shows you what that unit's made of.
It is, yeah. It's and I end up, we'll talk about later. I end up, when I got to HRT, it's the same thing, but I was embedded to both, the SEALs Dev Group, the Special SEALs, and then the unit at Fort Bragg with the Army. And I did a bunch of deployments with them. And you're talking about the quality of people, and some people come back to me, and I'll tell them stories and stuff. And I've gotten to the point where I didn't talk about them for a long time. I just kind of kept my stories in, and then people kind of want to hear about them, and you talk about them, and they're like, "Oh my God, wow! That's how amazing!" And someone will be like, "How do you say so humble?" I'm like, "Humble." I'm like, "Dude, I've literally served with 4 Medal of Honor winners, both SEALs and Army." And I'm like, and those guys are the quietest ones in the room. You don't get out of your shoes with situations like that. Cause the guys at the unit, deploy with them a number of times, and you hear the stories. You don't hear them from them. You'll hear them from their buddies. Cause the guys will never talk about them. And you're like, oh, that dude, yeah, I remember the day he killed like 21 people. You're like, what? Like, and then they'll tell you the story and it's not coming from him. So you better be humble, because the guys you're running with are literally like incredible. Like they're just unbelievable. They're quiet. They do their job, and then they don't talk about it. So it's pretty easy to not get over your shoes, so to speak, on who you think you are, because you just run with guys that are just unbelievable, and they don't talk about it at all.
Right. Now you got deployed to Iraq and Afghanistan?
So I think my count is 8 deployments to Iraq, and then I have a little over 4 years total in Afghanistan, starting like 2003. And I ended up running all FBI ops in Afghanistan for about 18 months from 2018 to 2020. So it's one of those, like, you do a bunch, they all kind of run into each other. And I did about five deployments to Africa and East Africa.
So the question I have with your deployments and the people you were surrounded by, you're good. You know you're good. You know you can take care of yourself and you're tactically sound. But do you internally go, I still have to raise my game because of who I'm around, and just take it to a level you never thought you could get to?
It's one of those things that you have to have confidence. You can't be arrogant. And you go into it and literally, like, you're in a helicopter with SEAL Team 6 or Delta. And I always said your first helicopter ride with those guys is they're probably told to take you, because at the time after 9/11, law enforcement and military started blending to a point. HRT, the hostage rescue team, started embedding overseas with these units to help them with sensitive site exploitation, interrogation, all the things that the Bureau was bringing to the military. You weren't there as another shooter. And that's what a lot of guys, like, when you're on HRT, you're at the top of the totem pole for FBI. But when you go down to those units, they're like, who are you? And you want to get on our helicopter? And it's an issue. So I always say that your first helicopter ride is probably that the colonel or the lieutenant colonel said, hey, you're taking FBI on this. And they probably bitched about it. And your first helicopter ride might be a freebie. Your second one is earned, because if you went on that op and you didn't add value to their operation, you weren't going again, because they go back to their boss and say, hey, the dude was like, he was a shitbag. He was a liability. Like, he didn't add anything to the fight. And their COs, their bosses would listen to him. They want to take you again. So your first helicopter ride might be like they were told to. Your second one was earned. So every time you went out with these guys, you had to earn your place on that helicopter, because normally there's only like 1 or 2 helos going in. I remember one time, we went into Fallujah after a high value target with the SEALs, and it was a very small group. There was only like 8 of us. And it was a fleeting target. I think we flew out at like 01, which was way past the time. So, but they wanted this guy so bad. And the fact that they threw me on that flight because I was doing really good sensitive site exploitation, interrogation, 8 of us like running through Fallujah, like, when the sun was coming up, you earned your place on there, because again, if you weren't value added, they weren't going to take you on something like that. So, those things meant a lot to me, but those guys were just, everyone did everything. Like you couldn't, like, just because I was in doing interrogations or sensitive site exploitation didn't mean when shit went down, you better be tactically competent. A lot of times they put me in charge. Like, sometimes we had other enablers, like some cellular folks that helped find cell phones from the ground. You had a bunch of, kind of extras in there, and they end up putting the FBI guys like, hey, you watch them, make sure that, they don't go in the wrong building. It was one of those things, but you had to do a bunch of different things to earn your keep. And every day, like, it was like nothing was guaranteed. If you screwed up one time with those guys, you were not going, or you were sent home. And there was a couple guys sent home, from the FBI SWAT teams and stuff. Just, they weren't there providing enough, and they're like, hey, like, you're not worth it, so to speak. So every time you went, you earned your seat.
Patriot is a premium whiskey hard seltzer. We've carefully crafted 4 flavors that not only taste exceptional, but can be enjoyed on any occasion, anytime. We're committed to giving back 5% of all profits to the core groups we call the backbone of America. We are proud to help those who serve our great country. This is America's Seltzer, the brand that stands for quality, community, and the American spirit.
HRT has a hostage rescue team in the FBI has an amazing reputation in law enforcement circles, and they've earned it. Tremendous work that's been done at some very high profile and some not so high profile scenes. What does it take to get into that as an FBI agent, and how did you find your way there through that?
So it was, I was at New Agent, where you spend about 6 months at Quantico, and HRT is right there at Quantico. And it's like this mysterious thing because it's at the end of the road. There's fences around it. You can't get there. Same with all the other, special units and stuff. And at night you'd hear the helicopters, you'd hear explosions. And as a new agent, you're like, holy cow. Coming from the Marine Corps as a new agent, I kind of knew what they're about and stuff. And you would see them in the chow halls or whatever. And you can always tell who they were. And at the time, I was just like, I looked up to him, but I was just like, I don't know, coming from the Marines and what I did, I'm like, I don't know if I want to go back through all that stuff. And I kind of left it out there. But I got down to Miami and I started working. First cases were fugitives, which was great. It was fun. Not a lot of paperwork. You just go find really bad people and you arrest them. And then, you have a federal case on a UFAP, unlawful flight to avoid prosecution. But they never press charges. So you're not getting into the court stuff. You're literally just day after day going looking for really bad guys. And then I end up we'll talk about it later, but I end up doing 2 years undercover against the mob, based on growing up in New Jersey. And I ended up going against the guy they wrote Sopranos about. I did that. And then I kind of had an inkling to go back to HRT. It's one of those things, like I was on the SWAT team. And I'm like, there's a step up from, Miami SWAT because it's part-time. And I started training for HRT. And the first time I went out, I was right in the middle of Undercover. So it's getting workouts and everything else you had to do for it wasn't that great. And then they ended up having selection in the summer. And HRT selection's 2 weeks. And it is, I thought I went through a lot with, Amphib Recon school and all the other schools I went to. And HRT selection was really... It was tough, but it was more tough mentally because it's a neutral environment. So after you get on the team, you make it, you understand why. So you'll start with 50 selectees and you don't have names. You do the PT test on the first day, and depending on how fast you run, like each group would have 5, and then it would be like the green pennies. You had a penny that you put over your kit, had 1 through 5. And then the second fastest runners had blue, yellow, and then, the least fastest runners had red. So I was never Rob or I was never D'Amico. I was blue 2. Like they don't talk to you by name. And then everything you do, there is no input. Like they tell you, if they tell you anything, they'll give you the instructions and then they just say, go. And like, if you're running, you have no idea how far you're running. You're just like, they're like, you are on a run. You will run the course according to the yellow tape. And when you're done, we'll tell you. And then you start running. So you don't know if it's a 2-mile run, a 7-mile run, a 10-mile run. And then you're running. And then there's an actual HRT operator like running with you, but he's not saying a thing. He's just looking at you to see what your level of effort is. Are you putting out? Are you holding back? And based on your number, they know exactly what you ran. So if you ran the 2-mile test and you ran a 5-minute mile and you're green 1, they expect you to run at a certain level. If you ran an 8-minute mile, but they never tell you if you're doing good or not. In the Marine Corps, they usually didn't tell you if you were doing good, but if you were doing bad, you usually got a ton of shit. Like you got yelled at. So you had that negative reinforcement. But HRT selection, they don't want that. They want you to go based on who you are and your true characters. And then there's no sleep. There's the first week, you're maybe getting an hour, 2 hours sleep. They're waking you up in the middle of the night. They're having you do stupid things. And on the other side of it, when I actually made it, I didn't get selected the first selection, which it crushed me. But when I look back at it now, I was in the middle of Undercover. I just didn't have it. And I had to go back, and I waited 2 years, and I really, I worked out. I dropped a ton of weight. And my second selection, I was just in phenomenal shape. And I made it my second time. But when I got on the other side and started running selections with everyone, we would have the first night we wake them up. They're in the FBI dorms, and we wake them up in the middle of the night, and we bring them down, and we throw them in a field, and we have a big truck, and we said, there's 2 tents in there, put them up, and then we'll give you instructions. And we don't give them any other instructions. We expect the guys that were in the military, because they're the military GP tents, general purpose tents, to figure out how to set them up. And we're kind of looking at how they're operating. Are they putting out? Are the military guys that know what they're doing taking charge? Are the ones that don't know what they're doing? Are they? And what's funny is, we would have guys in the wood line with night vision goggles that were never seen by the selectees. And if you ever put up a GP medium tent, on the outside, you have to pull the ropes and then the inside, you're putting up the poles to get it up. But once you do that, and the ropes go slack, there's no need for people outside. And on the night vision goggles, we're looking for, when the rope goes slack, does that guy go and find another job to do? Or does he hold a slack rope because he thinks no one's looking at him? And we would, on night vision goggles, we'd be sitting there watching that. And the guy that okay, slack rope, let me go. What else can I do, boss? And he goes and does something. And the guy holding a slack rope, that's not a guy you want on an op with HRT. And that literally would be some of those, he's got to prove at that point. It's not like he can't get over that, but he's got to prove himself later, because the little things like that are true, your character. When people aren't looking, when you don't think they're looking. And then it's funny, we brought a psychologist on board. We always had to take psychology tests, and we ended up bringing Delta's psych on board. And he started, we would take all these tests, 8 hours of tests. And then he would be okay, make this guy team leader, this guy assistant team leader, put this guy on the back door. And he would set up these tactical scenarios. Everyone thinks HRT selection is all about how you do physically. It's the only thing that we're doing physically is we're wearing you out so much, because everyone knows when they get there, what we want to see. But when you're so worn out physically, you don't have the mental capacity to pretend anymore. It really strips your ability to fake who you are. And then, so when we do these tactical scenarios after 3 PT sessions during the day, you've had 1 hour sleep, and we throw you in a tactical scenario, we're going to see the true you. So the guy that we think is an attention grabber, we put him at the back door, because as you know, on a raid, you hit the front door, the guy in the back door better be paying attention. He better not be wanting to look around what else is going on, because that back door is, it's like in football on a kickoff, you got to stay in your lane. So if you're at the back door, so we would based on the psychologist is, understanding info, but put him at the back door, because we know he's going to want to be at the front door, number 1 in the stack. Can he have the discipline to stay at the back door and do what he says? And if he doesn't, then we send the role player out the back door, and they lose. And then it's the team leader, we put the strongest guy as assistant team leader. We put the weakest guy as team leader. Is the strong guy going to override? How is he going to deal with that dynamic? So when you start putting those factors into it, you really start looking at the true character of a person. And that's really what HRT, selection's about. The physical part it is a gut check, but it's really to strip your ability to fake who you are, to really get that character.
You know what? That's why they are who they are. Because of things like that. And that is so telling. I love hearing that, they're hiding out and watching what everyone else isn't watching, and thinking no one's watching you, because that's where you really separate who is and who's responsible for what and who could do what. I think that is a great, just thing to do, especially in the selection part.
Every scenario we do in HRT selection comes from a real world event on the team's history. So everything that we do has a purpose, like that's something that's happened. And if you look at some of I did the FBI True thing about the pirate, might talk about that, but a couple other FBI guys did, but a couple other HRT guys did some HRT events. One of them was the boy in the bunker, the Alabama, where the crazy guy got on the bus, kidnapped the 5-year-old mentally challenged kid and put him in a bunker. And it was going bad, and they decided that they're going to have to do the emergency assault. And it was really odd how he had it booby trapped. And it got to the point where the first guy that went down the hole came into something that tangled him up. And it turned out he had a bunch of like webbing blocking the hole, because there's like a 12-foot drop down into this bunker. And they had to pull him back out. And then they tried to put the dog in. Dog got caught up in it. They pulled the dog out. So they're throwing like 9-bangers, like flashbangs that go off 9 times down there. The one guy sticks his head in, and he's cutting the cables that this guy's put in there. And then when he cuts them, he finally says, "I'm through." And there's a dude that jumps down into the hole 12 feet. Now, the bunker's only 5 by 8. He jumps down 12 feet into the pitch black, and within less than a second, another guy jumps in with him, because number one never goes somewhere with number two not going. If you're a SWAT guy, you understand that. When you go in a door, the way the SWAT goes in, depending on the SWAT team you train with, the first guy goes in and he kind of reads the room. And if he sees like the right side of the room, he can't see anything. So he's going to go to the left. His number 2 guy has to go to the right, because if he hesitates and there's someone in that corner that he can't see, he's going to shoot the number 1 guy. Your safety comes from the number 2 guy, and there can't be any lapse in hesitation. So this guy jumps into the bunker, and the number 2 guy is literally right behind him. And the bad guy is firing his pistol as fast as he can, and he's not hitting him. Like, and the number 1 guy, though, actually lands on the hostage and just covers him up. And then it comes the second guy in and the third guy in. The second guy in goes to shoot him, and he's so close that he's got the gun in him, and it puts the gun out of battery. So it's physically in him, and it pushes the barrel, the slide back, and he can't shoot him. The guy's still shooting at him, and the number 3 guy leans over him and ends up like killing him. No one had to say anything from the first guy going in to the third guy going in. And that's that like, you might take a SWAT team and they may have to tell you, go in, go in, go in. Like HRT, like that's not it. You're just going, and you know those guys behind you are going too. Like, there's no thought if number 2 and 3 are coming down. Like, you just absolutely know. I remember being, a buddy of mine, Steve, on my sniper team. When we did CQB, he was always number 1 guy. So the first door you go in, and I was always number 2. I literally was number 2 for like 4 years. I knew which way Steve was going before he did. Like, I read his body language. Like, even if he did a head fake and he wasn't sure, I could after 5 years of following a guy in a door, because you would train, I don't know how many like runs we went through in training. Like, it was just thousands and thousands, and you just all know each other so well that you read each other. And that, again, that's a full-time team that you can't compare to a part-time, SWAT team.
Mm-hmm. Totally different environment, totally different world. You're great at glossing over things that are ridiculously important.
This could be a Netflix series for
Yeah, it really could. Well, I don't want to blow the Netflix series, but I will say, undercover work, we've talked to some folks on this show who've done it at a very high level. Nothing is more high level than what you just glossed over, which is your infiltration of organized crime in New Jersey. Tell us what you can tell us about that experience.
That was one thing that it was one of those something I wanted to do, and I was working the fugitive squad, and I was also on the SWAT team, and we also taught street survival to other agents. So how to, like, regular agents that were working, like, foreign counterintelligence or, white collar or something, they weren't doing as much tactically. We'd bring them out for like 2 or 3 days and we'd run them through a bunch of tactics. And we were working with the organized crime squad. So at lunch, we break and the supervisor sits down and, like, I brought my lunch and stuff, and he starts talking, grew up in New Jersey. And I tell him kind of my background. He goes, "You ever think of, doing undercover?" I'm like, "Yeah, that's one thing, like, I've always wanted to do." I thought that, I'd watched Donnie Brasco, or at the time read Donnie Brasco. I'm like, that would be amazing. And he goes, "I think I have a spot for you, that we need someone in this undercover op, and you kind of fit the bill." And, but I only had a year in the Bureau, and normally guys going in undercover have 5, 7+ years. It's unheard of to do it anywhere before 3 years. He goes, "Well, if you want to do it, like, I'll talk to the ASAC, the assistant special agent in charge." I'm like, "I would love to." So he talks to him, and they basically say, "Hey, look, you're really new, but," and at the time, Joe Pistone had come back into the Bureau, and they're like, "Go out to this offsite," because Joe was doing still undercover, and talk to Joe Pistone. If he says you can do it, we'll let you do it. I'm like, "Holy shit." And they're like, "Don't take your Bureau car, just take your personal car, drive out there. This is the address, this is the thing, and don't say you're FBI." So I go to this, building in South Florida. It's like this office building, and I'm like, "What the fuck is it?" I didn't know much about it. So I go in, and I walk into his office, and his back's to me. And he goes, "Where are you from, kid?" And I said, "Jersey." And he says, "Where?" I said, "Wayne." And he goes, "Any girls by the name of Grocer?" I'm like, "Yeah, Sue and her sisters?" He goes, "Yeah. How do you know them?" I'm like, "Well, like, she worked at the gym I worked out at, and she was really good looking, and I asked her out every day, and if her steroid boyfriend ever found out, he would have kicked my ass." He starts laughing, and he goes, "Yeah, she was my goddaughter." So he when he was doing undercover, he was living in Patterson, which was right next to Wayne. There was this family that had, I think it was 5 daughters, and he was their godfather. So we start talking about Wayne, and we start talking about people, and at one point he says, "Do you know so-and-so?" I said, "Yeah." He goes, "How do you know him?" I said, "Well, I went out with his daughter." He goes, "What year?" I'm like, maybe 83, 84. And he said something like about him going to jail. I said, "Yeah." Like, I was at his going away party when he went to jail. Now, he was there as, like, Donnie Brasco, and I was there as a, like, 17-year-old kid trying to, like, go out with this guy's daughter. So we're literally at the same, like, point in life where I'm a 17-year-old kid, he's undercover. Like, it was one of those. So at the whole end of it, he says, "Hey, look, kid," he goes, "You can do this. Like, the mob guys will love you. You know what'll get you in trouble. You know how to treat them. What you don't understand is how the Bureau will fuck you over." He goes, "There'll be jealousy. There'll be all this other stuff. All your stress will come from the FBI, because the mob guys, every decision they make is based on 2 things, greed and respect. How much money can I make, and how will this look to everyone else outside, like, their image, their ego type of thing." And I ended up doing the undercover for 2 years, and he was right about everything. Like, all my stress came from inside the FBI, and the ability to predict what a mob guy was doing based on those, like, how much money can he make and how will it look to him, really kind of helped out. But it was one of those crazy, 2 years of my life. And it was stressful mentally, like, you can't believe, like, when you're pretending to be someone else to everybody. Like, it's not like you bring other people in. It's not like you tell other people. It is full time, and you're always constantly worrying about, what did I say to these guys before? Because he did tell, like, keep the lies close. Like, don't, like, you have to. I would hang out with these guys for all night, like 12 hours. You had to come up with stories. You had to talk about it. So I used to tell about all my Marine Corps stories, and I I changed time frames up a little bit. I never told them I was an officer because I think they would distrust if they knew I went to college. Plus, like my backstop, my whole background, I would have made a college up, and I told them I was my dad was in the Marines, and I like when I grew up, we were going from base to base. I told my mom died. I told her like my mom was a stripper that my dad met, at Camp Lejeune. She ended up ODing. My dad like was in the Marines, and we just went to every base because I knew all the Marine Corps bases and I could talk about them because they want like they understand that the FBI can provide any ID you want. And I had passports, driver's license, I had all that. They want to know who you are. They want to see a 3-dimensional person, not 2-dimensional. They want to know who you know on the street, how many people know you. But when I was looking at it, I said, well, if I tell them that my dad was in Marines, I can talk about like the schools at Camp Lejeune and Pendleton. I know about them, and it's going to be harder for them to find someone in that neighborhood. Like, because if I say you grew up in New York, they'll find someone who grew up in your neighborhood. Like they have as many snitches and sources than the FBI does. I remember I was signing my name, getting a rental car. The first time I had to sign, I went under Rob Russo. Keep your first name the same undercover, because like if someone calls your name and you don't turn to it, and then if someone calls you the wrong name and you do, it's bad. So Rob Russo, and the first time I was signing, it was for the rental car. I almost signed my, real name type of thing. And it's funny because I found out later the mob guys had a source at that same rental car, his national rental car. And they had a guy like, oh, you'll hook me up. I got a guy. Yeah. So they have sources everywhere too. So you really you can't fake anything. You have to go your entire life and you have to lie to everyone. And I'm actually I'm working with the guy, Christian, who's a great dude, who wrote a book about a SEAL buddy I know. And we're looking at doing basically a series on undercovers, on all these guys that have done some of the craziest stuff, because as much as you can like do things in a movie that seem cool, the true life stories are funnier than you'll ever get. And most of the time you're shitting yourself when you're going through this. Like you're literally, the stuff going through your own head during some of these undercover things are crazy. And like you're talking to yourself and you're thinking that they can hear you. And it's just odd, but like, so we have a bunch of undercovers that are willing to kind of talk about this on some of these things that they've done, because they're incredible.
You know what? We've been involved with undercovers, Dan and I, over our careers, and I don't think you'll find two people that have more respect for undercovers than me and Dan, because we relied on them. We worked with them. We were the ones sitting down the street listening to what they were doing, and that was as stressful as anything, because you're listening, but you're not there. The one question we always ask every undercover we've ever had on this, we've had some amazing undercovers, you included. What's the, oh crap moment? Am I made? Is this coming to an end? What am I doing? Did you have one of those?
I did a couple times. But I didn't go through FBI undercover school until a year into my undercover. So they threw me, I didn't have an ID. They threw me into this, and I look back on it, it's probably really bad on them to actually do that. But they thought that this was going to be more of a small role, but the bad guys started liking me. And the only reason they sent me an undercover, again, everything in the Bureau was cover your ass. An undercover got killed in Philly, and he was doing a cameo type appearance, and he didn't have undercover school. And then they realized after that, the bosses realized I've been doing it a year with mob guys, and one of the mob guys I'm hanging out with is literally a hitman. And they're like, "Oh, we better get you an undercover school." So it wasn't it wasn't that they cared about me; they cared about their career, as in the police world that happens. So I go up to undercover school in the FBI, and it's 2 weeks, and it's one of the again, it's one of the hardest in services in the Bureau. Probably HRT selection and undercover's a totally different world with it. And I remember they put you in these scenarios, really get you out of your comfort zone and stuff like that. But one of the scenarios is you go into the social club and you're doing things, and they basically get you to go out. You get a bunch of information on this violent thing that's going to happen, and they always, in the scenario, you got to make an excuse to get out the payphone if there's something violent coming up. So you end up you make an excuse to get out there. You go and you get this payphone and you call, and like, hey, this is Rob, and this is what they're talking about. And then you go back into the social club, and I'm telling you, the guys in this social club are true like fucking undercover legends. Guys that have like professional boxers that got in the bureau and they're undercover in the mob. We had a whole we had truckers in there, and and you go back in, and they end up saying, hey, the new guy, is this you? And they play the tape of you talking to the FBI on that payphone. And you're like, holy fuck. Like, and they look to see what you do. And the lesson there is, at some point, you got to say, yep, I'm Rob D'Amico. I'm an FBI agent. Because when you look at some of these groups, now some of them don't care, but like, especially with the mob, there's rules in there. They'll kill a snitch. They're not going to kill an FBI agent. They understand what that would bring down. Like there's a couple times that sometimes you have to say, I'm done with the cover. This is who I am. And that was one of those learning lessons. Like, so fast forward, the one guy I talked about, the hitman. So I was working with a cooperating witness, and he brought us into the mob. And I always told him, downplay me. Like my background was, I was in the Marine Corps. I was in Recon. I did a bunch of stuff. I got kicked out because I punched an officer. But downplay me. Like, don't like, and I was living on a yacht, in South Beach, running a nightclub. And, so they had a meeting on the yacht, and I always, I knew the mob guys, like, if you're trying to listen in on a meeting, they get suspicious. So every time they started talking dirty, I'm like, hey, let me go outside. I'll go clean the outside of the boat, type of thing. And at one point, because I would listen to the tapes after, and I did that a number of times. And the main guy, Bob, nicknamed Boca Bob, I listened. He's like, I like that kid. He knows when to leave. Because they thought like an FBI guy would want to be there, but the whole yacht was wired for video and sound. Like I didn't have to be there, so I would leave. And he said that. I'm like, oh, that's good. So one time, Bob's on there, and he brings this guy Anthony down, and the guy's nickname was Eyeball, because he'd supposedly taken a guy's eye out with a fork and showed it to him before he stepped on it. Like that was the rumor on the street, And he was the dude was a tough looking dude. He's scared the shit out of me. So I'm listening to the tape. I'm outside, and the cooperating witness is talking to them, and he starts bragging about me. Like, oh, Robbie was in the Marines. He did this and that. And I'm like, and I'm listening to tape going, you fucking idiot. I told you not to fucking do that. So sure enough, Anthony, this is all he says. He goes, well, he ain't fucking bulletproof. And I'm listening to tape. I'm like, oh, Jesus Christ. Now I got to overcome this. So a day or two later, I end up, they call the main undercover, to go meet, with Bob at like midnight at this condo up in North Miami Beach. And I bring the main undercover, and I go in, and they talk in the living room.
When it comes to the safety of law enforcement, first responders, and military personnel, every moment counts, especially in the dark. Streamlight provides the reliable, high-performance lighting solutions that these heroes trust in the most dangerous situations, whether it's a car stop, navigating dark alleyways, or exploring abandoned buildings. With Streamlight by their side, our heroes can tackle challenges with confidence, knowing they have the power of advanced lighting technology to guide them. From the first responders on the front lines to the law enforcement officers ensuring our safety, Streamlight is there to make every mission a little easier and much safer. Join us in supporting those who protect us. Visit Streamlight.com to discover how you can be part of the team keeping our heroes safe. Because when they shine, we all shine.
Have you ever wished you could go back in time and see the events that shape the true crime cases that fascinate you? With newspapers.com, it's like having a time machine to the past. Dive into more than 1 billion newspaper pages from 1690 to 2025 and relive the headlines that shocked entire towns. Explore newspapers from the US, UK, Canada, Australia, and beyond with a simple search. Read the breaking news as it happened, crime scene reports, witness testimonies, and courtroom drama. Explore forgotten clues and see how the media shaped the narrative of infamous cases. But it's not just the major stories. Newspapers.com lets you dig into local mysteries, missing persons reports, and the small-town scandals that history forgot. It's the closest you can get to being there when it all unfolded. So, if you're ready to dig deeper into the crimes that keep you up at night, start your journey today at newspapers.com. Use the code GOLDSHIELDS for an exclusive 20% discount on your subscription.
I'm literally like thinking, because I can't tell him I know what happened because I was listening to tapes of what he said, but I can like go back and say, well, the cooperating witness. So I just look at him. I said, you're right. And this was after like literally 5 minutes of dead silence. And he goes, right about what? I said, no one's bulletproof. And he thinks about it. And it was a way that I thought, like, okay, I'm going to confront the situation that like the guy told me, like he said that. And he looks at me and goes, yeah, you're right. No one's bulletproof. And then we actually became fairly good friends. It wasn't a confrontational, like, hey, motherfucker, I'm not bulletproof. It was just like, yeah, no one's bulletproof. Like, meaning you too, so to speak. And we end up getting along after that. Like, and it like we got in the point where we started hanging out a bunch. So one time I'm up in New York City, and it was odd because he was a lower level guy. And when I went up to New York, the main old man down here, Bob, would call up and say, hey, Rob's coming up, like, treat him right. And I would get like royal treatment from capos and stuff like that. So I'm out with Anthony, and we're going to the strip clubs and stuff that like these guys own. And we're driving, and I'm driving. I got the rental car. I rented a Lincoln Town car. That's what all mob guys, rent.
I see you in a Prius for some reason.
Well, I'll tell you, like, so I'm driving, and Anthony's in the front seat with me, and there's two of his guys like are behind me, and they're definitely enforcers. So I'm like in a car with three probably hitmen, and I'm in New York, so I'm not carrying a concealed weapon. Not that I could do anything with it, but if I'm carrying, that's like in New York, that's a big crime. Like, you want to do that normally. In Florida, I could get away with carrying it. So I'm driving. I have no idea where I'm driving to. They're just giving me directions, like, get off of there. And we drive by, and you see the signs for the landfills. So, like, I see this like sign for a landfill coming up, and I'm like, holy shit. If he tells me to make a right and go down that road, like, what am I going to do? And this is going internally as I'm driving. This internal conversation is, well, if he tells me to go down, like maybe we got to bury someone, or maybe it's me, or like this conversation's going on, and I'm going, all right, if I go down the road, do I just dive out of the fucking car? Do it like what point do you say, I'm not going further, like, try to figure it out? And this whole thing, and everything slows down to a point, and time's going really slow, and you're thinking about this, and you're trying to grasp the conversation because they're talking to you, and you think that they can literally like see the smoke coming out of your ears trying to figure this out. And then we drive past that exit, and like, oh, thank God. Like, but the whole night was kind of like that. So it's one of those things where the stress level that goes, it just gets, it's one of those things that is so mentally taxing when you're done with the night, like spending 12 hours with these guys, because you get done at like 3 or 4 in the morning, and you're just like, you're totally smoked. More than anything I've done physically after something like that, because you're always trying to remember, did I tell him this before? Did I tell him this? Did I say that? Trying to stick to your story. And then you get done with it all, and it's just like this unbelievable drop of adrenaline and just like, fuck. So those nights are pretty taxing.
It's like you just described, and we've all done it. It's kind of, you have to now be a perp who's trying to keep his lies in order. How many guys have we all dealt with that the more you talk, just keep asking them, at some point they're going to screw up. Now you have to be that person.
But, the one thing Pistone told me is like, hey, look, if you're getting caught in a lie, just fucking tell them you're lying, because they all lie to each other too. So it's like, hey, just like, yeah, fuck you. Like, you don't, like, you to lie to me. But it's funny though, one time we came out of Wiggles, which was a strip club that the guy owned. Remember that one in Queens?
No.
Wiggles? Yeah.
No. Dan's a Queens guy. Got ya.
No, okay.
Nope.
I got that, Fifth Amendment. So I come out of there at like 3 a.m. I've been in there like 12 hours. And the strippers, like the managers there will tell them, see if he's wearing a wire. Like, and the stripper, like, what are you going to tell a stripper not to touch you? So and as you know, some of the clubs up there had counter electronics in there. So I literally a lot of times did not wear a wire if I was going out on nights like this, because you just don't know where you end up. So, but we get out of Wiggles like 3:30, 4 a.m. And I get into my car and I'm going to drive him home. Now, I didn't drink at the time, which was everyone's like, oh, like, didn't they like find that out? I'm like, no, they liked it because they didn't want DUIs. Like, it's one of the like, oh, Robbie can drive. So I get in the car, and as you know, like the NYPD, like, organized crime task force watches these places. I'm coming out with 3 made guys, like 3 at least made guys, or enforcers, hitmen, and they see a guy they don't know. So get in the car, and it's funny, when I got there, like a 12-year-old kid comes up to me as I'm parking this rental car, and he goes, hey, $20, I'll make sure nothing happens to your car. And I'm thinking, well, if I don't pay you the 20, you're the one who's going to break the window. But he's a mob wannabe type of guy. So I'm like, all right, here's 40, here's 20. I'll give you 20 later. So I come out and give him 20. My car's not wrecked. I get in it, and as soon as I make a right turn, I get pulled. And it's not a mark unit. It's like, it's a non-mark unit with the light up in the dashboard. And he comes up. He's like, driver's license, registration. And I'm like, now I got 3 mob guys in the car. And I said, officer, what could I possibly done? He goes, you didn't have a turn signal on. Literally, my turn signal's on. Like it hadn't even turned off yet. I'm like, my turn signal. He's like, shut the fuck up. Driver's license, registration. I'm like, well, it's a rental car, but here's my driver's license. So he's looking at it, and I can, like, he's writing it down, like, because he's trying to ID me. Like, I've been there before. So he goes, hey, you mind if we search the car? And I said, yeah. And he goes, all right, step out. I said, no. I said, yeah, I mind. He goes, you mind? And he goes, I can get a dog out here, and we'll, like, and I said, well, dog's going to take 45 minutes to get here? What's your probable cause to keep me here for 45 minutes to fucking wait on a dog? So your fucking probable cause, even if you find something, is going to be thrown out of court. And he looks at me and goes, your fucking mob lawyer tell you that? I said, yeah. And I got him on speed dial. You want to fucking talk to him? He threw my license at me so hard back, it actually cut my cheek. He fucking goes, get the fuck out of here. And we start driving, and I was like a hero to these guys. They're like, fuck, that was great, man. You told, like, it's one of those things, like, but it, like, actually, like, boosted up my, my thing with them. But it's funny, because I'm like, oh yeah, I knew exactly what was going on.
That's funny stuff. That's real life stuff you can't make up.
There's so many, like, looking back on it, it's like so many of those. But when it's going on, you're literally like, you're talking to yourself. You're like, how am I going to get out of this? How am I going to do this? Like, and you look back on it and with favorable, but at the time you're literally inside, your insides are so tight. They're so wound tight. And I see, like, I can't believe, like, Pistone did 6 years of that. Like, no wonder he had issues after, because after 2 years, it was, I did learn during that to think before you talk, because beforehand, like, I opened my mouth way too quick. And when you do an undercover, you really have to think about everything you say to everybody. So it was one of those things, like, I'm like, all right, I kind of learned to not speak when I'm just, like, think about what you're about to say before you say it.
I mean, going back to what you said before, him giving you the blessing is kind of like the Pope saying you could be Catholic.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like I read his book, I don't know how many times. It was one of those, it is the Almighty saying that, hey, you can do this. But thank God he told me to be. At the end of the Undercover, after 2 years, they accused me of a whole bunch of stupid shit. That was not like, it was one of those things like, and I actually ended up teaching at Undercover school, and it was all financial. And I have accounting background. I didn't say that. I sucked at English. When I was going to college, I knew the FBI liked the accounting major, so I majored in accounting because I'm like, I can do numbers, I can't do English. So when I was doing Undercover, I was really mindful of numbers because that's how you get in trouble. Like, money and like I was spending money, like all this other stuff. And that's part of what they accused me of at the time. And, so when I get up to HRT, Undercover school was at Quantico. So I would go over I'd do a full day at HRT, go over at night and help teach Undercover. And that was one of the things I brought into it, is like teaching these undercovers how to like make sure you're sound financially, because that's how they'll go after you. And it all comes back to Pistone telling me like, your stress is going to come from the Bureau. It's not going to come from the bad guys. They're easier to predict than the Bureau folks.
So the FBI being a bureaucracy, and Tom and I being familiar with it, there is amazing amount of rules for everything you do, right? I mean, that you can't leave the office basically to go interview somebody without getting approvals and doing ops plans and whatever. I mean, there's just a lot of stuff. So you're 2 years, you're embedded with an organized crime family, and they still came down on you about what? About not doing money vouchers or what, like.
They also made me, because there's a Group 1 Undercover, they make me the Group 1 accountant. Now, so I'm spending the money and I'm accounting for it. And I told them like 3 times, rules of accounting, you don't have the person spending it accounting for it. Like I kept telling them, but no one wanted to do that as an accounting major. So I would every 2 weeks, I would go into the office at like a really odd time on Sunday. I would do it like a 1 hour counter surveillance route, go into the office and do all the accounting. And it was crazy. The auditor was an idiot. Cause I would have like a $3,000 bill from a strip club because I'm out with like 20 mob guys and I'm the only one sober enough to pay at the end, and he's like, well, where's the receipt? I'm like, yeah. You have me saying that I spent it because there is no fucking receipt. Like, you don't ask for receipts. So at the end of this whole thing, I'm actually on the SWAT team and I'm going to North Carolina to look for Eric Rudolph. So I take the day off because the next day we're driving up. And I get this like 911 on my pager at like 5 p.m. in this night. And I look and I can tell it's an office number, but it's not anyone I know. So I call it and he says he's SSA so-and-so, supervisory special agent. And he says, hey, I need you to come down to the office. And I said, well, tomorrow I'm going on to North Carolina. And I live 45 minutes from the office. I said, so, what's this about? He goes, I'll tell you when you get here. I said, well, I don't fucking work for you. So unless you tell me, I'm not coming. He goes, you will come down here. And I'm like, I don't work for you. You're not telling me why. I'm not coming. So he hangs up. And then about literally like 3 minutes later, I get a call from my actual supervisor, Charlie. And he says, hey, I don't know what's going on, but the SAC, they're on some leadership retreat. SAC told me you have to get to the office as soon as you can. So I'm like, all right. So I get in, I have my undercover car still, convertible Corvette. So I jump in my vet, I drive down the Florida Turnpike and get off, and I walk in his office, and there's like 6 people in his office, and I can tell they're all financial people. It's an auditor. And I'm like, so he's typical, supervisor, who's never done casework in his life. So he goes, I'm going to tell you right now, you need to be truthful with me. And I look at him, I said, fuck you. Like, who are you to tell me, like, is my integrity in question? He goes, yes, it is. He goes, I have $700,000 unaccounted for, and you weren't anywhere to be found. I said, dude, what are you talking about? And he starts like going through this stuff. And I said, the first time you text me, I answered. I happened to be on an RDO, which is a regular day off, because I'm leaving tomorrow for like 3 weeks. And he starts chiming in. And we had 3 bank accounts on this undercover. We had one that was kind of known. The FBI headquarters would wire us money for the ops for this group 1. So I had an undercover account that the bad guys knew about. I had a middle account because I never wanted to connect to the account that the FBI wired to the last one. Because again, mob guys have sources too. So we would move money between the 3 of them. The bank account that we were laundering money through and doing heroin deals with, all the records were kept on the office was on the yacht. And I would like get all those paperworks and I would Xerox copy the bank accounts because you had to reconcile them every month. So on those Sundays I would come in, I'd take Xerox copies, I reconcile them all. And the auditor had to sign off on them and everything else. So what happened was, I guess the auditor came in and it was a new auditor and he said, hey, I got to audit, I forget the name of the undercover op. And they're like, oh, Rob brought some documents over. They're over there in a box. Now the group 1 had ended already. So he gets these records and he sees none of these bank accounts are signed off by the auditor and the other people are supposed to sign off on them because they're the ones that were kept on the boat. Like you don't have the FBI auditors, copy on there. So he starts going through them and adding up all these deposits and withdrawals and comes up with some like $700,000 because we were laundering the same money over and over. We would take like whatever the VIG was, we would take it out, that come in. So he thinks he's found like $700,000 unaccounted for. And then they look for my passport and they can't find it and all this other stuff. And they go to the supervisor, says, hey, we think, and now FBI Miami had a bunch of FBI guys get in trouble. Like it's not a great place. So they just arrested literally a supervisor for taking money out of his safe that they got on a search warrant. So that when they go to the supervisor, he thinks he's got the next big score. So when I come in there and they start talking about $700,000 accounted for, and they point to the files, I realized what they did. All those original documents that I copied were in the file, but they thought this was a separate bank account. So I start kind of on the inside snickering because I know what these idiots are about to get into. And I said, hey, if you think you have $700,000 unaccounted for, what did headquarters say when they didn't get their money back? He goes, what do you mean? I said, well, according to the DIOG, which is a domestic investigation operations guide or whatever the hell it's called. I said, when is headquarters supposed to get all the money back from an undercover op? And he doesn't know. I said, well, it's 30 days. So if you think, and we're 60 days past the end of this case, so you think headquarters wouldn't like somehow call down to the field office saying we haven't got our money back? And he goes, well, we'll get to that. And he starts like going through all this stuff. And I said, look, and now I'm playing with them because I know what mistake they made. And I said, do me a favor. I said, Peter, go to the record, for the case and pull out bank account number 3. And he pulls out the document, the bank statement. And I said, would you read the bank account number to this fucking idiot with his newly discovered documents? And they read it off and it's the same account number. And then the guy kind of goes like pale. And I'm like, yeah. And I explained to him what actually happened. I said, so you fucking morons for 2 days thinking you had something, didn't like reference the account number to what was actually in the file? Because I'm not keeping like, this on the boat. So then they start like, and now I'm getting cocky and I'm like really going back at him. So I'm like, and I'm just hitting him left and right on stuff. He goes, well, where's your passport? And I said, well, according to the DIOG, where should my passport be? And again, a blank statement. I said, well, it should be in my fucking supervisor's safe because that's the only place besides my person during an operation that's allowed to be. Have you called Charlie and asked to go into a safe to see if my passport's in there? They're like, no. I said, I didn't fucking think so. So we get down to it. And now I'm like getting really cocky. And he goes, well, what about like, and he starts naming off all this jewelry. He goes, where's this gold Rolex? And so when I first signed up for this case 2 years prior, all I wanted was FBI headquarters has a bunch of jewelry that they'll put in cases. And I said, give me a Rolex Submariner, because my role was a Marine Recon guy, and I didn't wear a bunch of jewelry anyhow. But some like if you did overseas back in the 80s, you could buy a Submariner, stainless steel Submariner for like $1,200 in the Middle East. And a lot of Recon guys and SEALs had Submariners. So I said, well, I requested from headquarters literally a Submariner. I get this box from headquarters at the beginning of the case, and I open it up. And it's like the Mr. Guido starter kit. It is like fucking gold chains, this gold nugget. Like, it is like the gaudiest shit I've ever seen. And I'm like, what? So I literally called the woman who's on the thing, and I said, hey, look, whatever her name was, I said, I'm Rob. I'm like on this case. I said, I requested a Submariner, and I got everything. Like I literally said, I got the Mr. Guido starter kit. Like I got a gold chain that would sink a SEAL, both Animal SEAL and Navy SEAL. And I got this like pinky ring that would and she goes, I just saw the case was an Italian OC. So I sent the usual. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to send back the usual. You have a Submariner. She's like, yeah, you want one of those? I'm like, yeah, just send me simple Submariner. So I sent all the other stuff back, and he starts asking literally, because in the case file, it doesn't show like, and he goes, well, where's this, and this? And I said, I didn't take that crap. I said, I only took in Rolex Submariner. And he goes, well, where's that? And I said, well, it's at the fucking pawn shop. And like this, like again, he's like, the pawn shop. So you did. And I'm like, hey, dumbass, that's a joke. Like, it is at my house. I don't wear it all the time. Then I had to go back home and drive and bring that Submariner back. And I'm like, and here's a 281 because you signed for it because you're fucking taking it. I don't want it. He's like, I'm not signing for it. And I said, if you want it, you're signing this 281 because you're taking it off my property. So that was one of those things that after the whole thing of you literally not like all the stuff you put up with, that's what you get at the end of your time doing Undercover. That was so stressful. And that's where Joe Pistone was spot on. And that's what I started teaching guys at the Undercover school, how to cover your ass with bullshit like that.
So, Rob, your retelling of these things is fascinating, and it's really, Tom and I are shaking our heads because we have similar experiences with certain law enforcement bureaucracies that don't seem to, be on the same page as those who are actually doing cases. But you are involved in a lot of stuff, and I can't wait. You've got projects that you mentioned earlier. You got stuff you have coming out. We're looking forward to seeing more of that. But what is it that you're engaged in going forward that you want to tell our audience about? Because, you've got so much to share and so much experience. So we'd love to hear it.
I'm looking like, we met on, Surviving the Survivor. Joel's a great dude, like fellow New Jersey guy. And I really like the aspect, like when you take someone like the Undercover show that we're looking at doing, hopefully it sells and it'll come out on one of these streaming services. And next time I'll push it if we know. But I'm working with a company in UK with Christian trying to sell that. And I think it'll be really good. But it's one of those things. I lost my train of thought. Surviving the Survivor. So I like when the premise that you have someone that's involved in it ask questions, and you have someone that's totally outside of something ask questions, because I think to ask, like, you guys, you're in law enforcement, so you guys have a totally different, like, you understand what I'm talking about, and you see it. When you have someone that's outside of that world in totality, they don't even think to ask those questions. They ask really, so when you do that, when you have that back and forth with an insider and someone on the outside, you really get the whole premise, because the audience sees what they don't know to ask, and then you have someone ask things that they want to know. And it's one of those things that you delve into. We're working on a show about interrogators, which is the same way, where it'd be kind of like Judge Judy, and there's some really good interrogators out there. As you guys know, some guys really specialize in stuff. Like And I wasn't a typical, like, I didn't like ton of cases. Like, I wasn't a case agent guy. I went from Miami, fugitives, undercover, HRT. But we have the FBI has some unbelievable, like 20-year case agents that they just know how to grind an investigation. And when you put and then we have guys that can interrogate like you can't believe. Like you see it, it's just like, wow, like this dude is just, and we're looking at doing a show about interrogations. And the same thing where you have someone that's totally outside of it and they have such different questions than if you're inside the thing. So those are the two shows that we're working on. We never even got to the pirate story, chasing a pirate around Africa for 8 weeks before arresting him back in Somalia.
This is going to be part 1 because there's no way we cannot have a Rob D'Amico part 2.
No way.
I had kind of like a checklist. We had like 2 things. we have much more to do with you, my friend.
Yeah.
So I'm working on like that. Hopefully that comes into a movie because it. And again, I keep telling the people that are involved in that, it's not about me. It's through my eyes, but there's so many people. I've never done anything alone in the Bureau. And that's the one thing I hated. In order to get promoted in the Bureau, you had to write about what you did. And finally, my last one, I'm like, I didn't do anything alone. Like I did nothing in the Bureau alone. I did it with a team. It was always a team. If it was military, me, or like other FBI guy, like nothing is alone, but the Bureau made you write for you. And I think that's bad because the people get promoted could write Tom Clancy novels about getting a fucking glass of water, type of thing. And like, it's one of those, like the guy in the street, the guy who doesn't want to get promoted, like that's the guy you want to get promoted. Like he's going to fight it all the way, but that's the guy that you want in that seat to a point. But I'm also looking at, with Joel from Surviving the Survivor, we're looking at a contract to add a show Inside the Line with Rob. And it's one of those inside the line, meaning the blue line, because that's the line I'm in, but any line, like getting insiders into the Army line, the green line, the red line, firefighter, like everyone has these inside like stories that one, just the vocabulary and how you talk about it, pulling that out of people. Cause there's so many, like the movies are great, but the true stories are funnier. They're like, and then the connections of people. Like we didn't even get into like the guys I met in Delta and SEAL Team 6, the shit that went on. And then you would literally be around the world in some weird shithole, flying in on a helicopter, and I'd get off in night vision goggles to go pick someone up. And I'm like, Joe, is that you? Like, dude, what are you doing here? It literally around the world, someone I worked with, and like he's on some covert op and I'm grabbing a guy and I'm like, holy fuck, like, and I hadn't seen him in like 3 or 4 years. So all those inside stories and stuff, really, I think that's what people kind of like really kind of want to see, but it's humbling. It's not braggadocio. It's just things that went on. And there's lots of people that could have done what I did. I just, like I said, I feel like Forrest Gump, where I fell into a bunch of stuff and I was with unbelievable people. Like some of the generals I worked with, General Thomas and Votel and Donahue, and these guys, what I learned from them and how they led and did stuff. And then some of the guys who won medals of honor, you're like, yeah, and they never tell you the story. It's always the buddy says, oh, do you know who that is? And I'm like, oh, like, oh, he did this, this, and this. Same thing in the police world. Like, the guy who's the loudest probably did the least. Like the guy at the party that's like running his mouth, you're like, and then it's the guy in the quiet, and the guy in the corner quiet probably killed the most people you've ever seen. Is one of those like kind of things, and you're like, and then you hear about it, and he's just very humble about it. Like it's one of those things.
The great ones are humble, and you are one of the great ones. Your career speaks for itself. You're a fantastic storyteller, and even though I can barely understand with the Jersey stuff, I mean, I know that being from New Jersey, English is a second language, and you have adapted very well. You've learned a lot of regular English, so we appreciate that, But no, this has been an amazing discussion, and I'm looking forward to part 2 with you, Rob. This is just, it's a blast. This is like so much fun for us.
I'm glad you enjoyed it.
You know what, Dan, when you think you have a successful, good career, then you sit down with Rob D'Amico, you're like, I didn't do nothing.
I didn't do anything.
But I did shit.
I'm a rookie. I'm just yeah, no. You can't make it up. Your career is the stuff of books and movies, and I hope it all ends up there because people do need to hear. You're right. People want to and need to hear these stories to see the level of commitment that people have in law enforcement and military, the things that they do that people can't fathom, the things that they get trained for, the things we take for granted. Like you do stuff and they're like, yeah, it was just a regular night. The average person go, what? You did what? You saw what? Yeah. Right. And
We need good people. Like, we need to keep that line going and all that. We need, good people all across the things that like get beat up on, and I'm about accountability too. Cause like, I admit there's bad FBI, there's bad cops, there's like, and if you want I always say like, if like, I see so many videos of cops doing great things and I'm like, that's awesome. But I also have to say, you have to be true in that when you look at a cop doing something bad, you got to be able to say, you got to rise above it and say, that's bullshit. That absolutely should not be happening. Cause I look at some of it and if some of these cops did stuff to me like that, I'd be like, I would be outraged. Or if they did it to my kids, like, so you have to like, in order to get the praise, you have to be accountable on the other side. And that's where, like I always talk about, the thin blue line has to be both ways. You have to have accountability in everything you do, good, bad, and indifferent.
100%. Couldn't have said that any better. Because you got to be truthful. You got to be true to yourself. You got to be true to the profession and call out bad when bad, is present. And I think we all do that and agree with that. But Rob, you know what? This was a great discussion. This was a great show that we kind of knew it was going to be. And like Dan said, you are an amazing storyteller with things that you've done and others have done, and you're humble as hell. And that's why we have guests like you, because people, our followers, listeners are going to love this because it's true life. It's not made up. It's not, you're not fully yourself. You're not talking about you talked about more other people than you did yourself tonight. And that's what it's all about. So thank you so much for joining us tonight and being here.
So I do a lot of news commentary. So my website, sierra1consulting.com, has a bunch of my news clips and podcasts and stuff like that. Do security assessments still. I got to pay some bills,
Yeah, well, thank you again. Sierra One Consulting, sierra1consulting.com, right? All right. Thank you so much, Rob D'Amico. We will have you back. We look forward to it. And I can't wait to break bread with you because I just want to hear more of these stories. And it just fast.
You're going to have to come to Florida because Minnesota is kind of cold.
Yeah, no, I'm passing on Minnesota. No.
We can find a way to get to Florida.
Maybe I'll be there this year. Yeah, a couple of times probably. All right. So, Tom, take us out as you always do, brother. Another amazing discussion. Looking forward to part 2 with Rob D'Amico.
Yeah, this was certainly part 1. Not even planned, but it's ending up that way because there's so many stories and great events out there that you were involved in that we need to talk about. So this part of our show is always our special to pray for our law enforcement officers out there. They do an unthinkable job in the worst situations around the world and in this country that normal people won't do. And they need our support. They need our prayers, themselves and their families. Members of the military on deployment, their families somewhat get deployed too. They have to deal with everything too. So please pray for all of them. Say hello to them on the street, pat them on the back, say thank you, because that can change a day. Just hearing someone say thank you. So please keep them in your mind. And as always, our website, thegoldshieldsshow.com, youtube.com/@goldshields, and every audio channel you can think of. Please check us out. Follow us, hit the subscribe button, all that good stuff so you don't miss shows like this. For my partner, Dan Murphy, an incredible guest, Rob D'Amico, thank you again. This is Tom Smith for Gold Shields. Everyone, please stay safe. We'll see everybody soon.